Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're just after 8:30, so I think the timing is good now to get started. I'm sure we'll have more people that will be joining us as we start the conversation. So good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm very happy to have you all here. We are just chatting about the fact that it's hard to believe we're only a few days away from August beginning, and as crazy as June was, I think July may have been just a little bit more wacky. So we'll see what August has to hold, especially for all the parents out there and teachers trying to figure out what's going to happen and what the first part of the new semester is going to look like. So our support goes out to all you parents and teachers out there, definitely. My name is Ken Schmitt. I'm the CEO and founder of TurningPoint Executive Search, but also of the Sales and Marketing Leadership Alliance. We've been around for 9 years. We have physical chapters throughout Southern California, and we were about to launch our physical chapter in Austin back in April, which, needless to say, got tabled for a bit. But we were very happy to actually launch our Austin virtual chapter last month. So we've already had a number of folks that have been attending and signing on. And going forward, every month we'll have one speaker from Austin and then one speaker that'll be based in Southern California, or in the case of Marissa this morning, who used to be based in Southern California and is now just outside of Boston. So that's kind of the game plan. But as you can see, we have a number of great supporters and our sponsors here. They've been on board for many, many years. So I really want to thank them for making this possible, for staying involved, even as we've made the transition from physical in-person meetings to virtual. So thanks to everybody who's here this morning. And we also, one of the things that we used to do in person was do member spotlights. And we had kind of tabled that for a while, trying to figure out the right kind of process and dynamic here virtually. But we're going back to that now. So our first member spotlight this morning is Lauren Fair, and she's going to talk a little bit about her business, Loyalty Craft, and also talk about what's changed for her business in the last few months here. So Lauren, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Elaine, as well, for the opportunity to be the member spotlight. I also really appreciate being an SMLA member. I love the learning opportunities we have in this community, and appreciate the shift you have made to making this work virtually. So again, my name is Lauren Fear. I'm the founder and president of Loyalty Craft Consulting. We are a customer experience consultancy, and we were founded in 2016 with the focus on helping companies create meaningful products and services. Prior to my time being an entrepreneur, I spent 15 years in technology consulting, managing global software teams in retail, healthcare, and financial services. I founded Loyalty Craft with a passion for kind of recognizing that the companies that have been successful, their competitive advantage is their customer experience. So I really wanted to help companies do that. A quick story, last year I had the opportunity to work with a toy distribution company, and in facilitating workshops with them and their customer-facing employees, their average tenure was about 20 years. And so they joked with me that, can you really teach an old dog new tricks? We really focused on walking in the customer's shoes, creating customer personas and empathy maps to help them really understand exactly who their customer was. We also recognized that, after 20 years of kind of being beat down with difficult customers, it was really helpful to work on some confidence and help them kind of with their feeling of managing expectations. And so at the end of my time working with them, they actually gave me this really great gift basket full of toys, which my children just loved. I ended up keeping one, which is my sloth. And they of course, put the sloth in a power pose. And it's a great reminder for me of the fact that, I was able to help them respecting each other and appreciating their customers. But the real results were increased order volumes, greater customer retention, and higher net promoter scores. And that's really, especially because they're doing all their work virtually, even before coronavirus, just very special. Now that we're in kind of COVID lockdown, I've certainly pivoted my work to be completely virtual, and using tools like Mural and Miro, I'm able to offer all my services collaboratively online. Customer experience has certainly shifted as well, and thinking about digital first, safe and contactless experiences that still delight customers, and really figuring out new ways to listen to customer insights is what I've been focused on. If these are things that you'd like some help with, or if there's anything you'd like to discuss, Elaine will be sending out a flyer at the end of the session today. And I'd love to chat with you and learn more. Thank you again, Ken, for the opportunity, and on to the main event.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Yeah, so that's great. It's a good example. We have, as you might recall, for folks that I've talked to in the past, we have just over 100 members total. And one of the things that we always talk about is just how fortunate we are with the breadth and depth of experience, of knowledge, and backgrounds as well. Diversity in terms of thought, in terms of experience. So I encourage you, if you have any needs out there for really any kind of service, in this case, obviously with customer service mapping with Lauren, please check out the website. You'll see all the members listed there with their areas of expertise and their contact information as well. But I guarantee you pretty much anything that you might need in your own business, either somebody in SMLA has that knowledge base or they know somebody who does. So we encourage you to tap into that collective as well. Right, good. So as I mentioned before, we started doing the spotlights again this morning. If you are a member and you're interested in being a member spotlight going forward, please let myself or Elaine know, and we will be sure to get you onto the list there as well. One last thing I want to bring up, just before we go ahead and get started with Marissa this morning. One of the things that we also were doing in person was success trios. When we were meeting in person on a regular basis, one of the things that we found was that people getting together in kind of a 3 or 4 person group after the regular large meetings was a huge value to them, largely because they were able to do a bit of a deeper dive, if you will, to figure out kind of what each person's expertise is, who their referral network is, and how they can help each other out. So we have done that also virtually. It translated a lot better than we initially expected, which has been great. So if you are interested in being in a success trio, which simply means that you'll be paired up with 2 other people, and then you'll have a chance to connect with them and meet virtually, and again, do a bit of a deeper dive. It's just a great way to learn about other businesses and help each other out, and to also get those referral programs going. So please email myself or Elaine and let us know if you want to be in a success trio for this month. All right, great. As Lauren said, now on to the main event. So I have known Marissa actually for quite a while. As she'll tell you, she used to live here in San Diego. We first met when she was over at LPL Financial and had a chance to work together, and that was fantastic. We've stayed in touch ever since. She has since moved a couple of times since then. I'll let her kind of go through that. But with that, I'll let you start with your introduction, Marissa. So welcome this morning.
Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you everybody for joining this morning. It's a few hours later on the East Coast, so I'm very appreciative of having the opportunity to meet with you guys first thing this morning. Lauren, I loved what you just shared. I was actually taking some notes right away in terms of the collaboration. And I saw a little note come up in the chat as well about the importance of keeping customer service front and center in customer experience, especially when we've all undergone such a significant shift to do business in a very different way. So I've learned something within the first 5 minutes of our session today. So thank you. As Ken mentioned, we have known each other for quite some time. I actually left the East Coast originally back in 2008 when I was recruited to join a newly built team at LPL Financial in San Diego. I actually had the great fortune of being recruited by the former chief marketing officer of Morgan Stanley, who also left New York, moved to San Diego, and was building out a new team. And as you can imagine, in 2008, making a shift like that, we didn't know it honestly at the time, but we were right on the fringe of the financial crisis that is probably still all too familiar for all of us, but especially those within the financial services industry. So I know we'll talk a little bit about that later on during today's session. But my journey into marketing started completely by accident, to be perfectly honest. When I had originally begun my college education, I had every intention of becoming a lawyer. So when I enrolled in school, 20 plus years ago, I had a path all mapped out. I worked on a thesis. I was a government major at a large liberal arts institution right here in Massachusetts. And about midway through junior year, as I was working on my thesis, I realized I had absolutely no interest in going to law school, and therefore probably would make a very, very terrible lawyer. So it was a pretty, for somebody in her very early 20s, pretty significant existential crisis. So I graduated, I kept my government major, but I realized soon after that at least for me, the best way to really figure out where I wanted to start paying more attention to career development, it required me spending more time in school. I actually enrolled in a program that was on Harvard's campus. It was a graduate certificate in management. The very first class I took was marketing management, and it was taught by an adjunct professor who was also a managing director at Hill Holliday, which is a very large Boston-based ad agency. And in a true sort of road to Damascus moment, that's when I realized this is it. This is just awesome. I absolutely love this discipline. It combines the quantitative, the qualitative, the creative, the opportunity to persuade, the need to be able to write and communicate well. So it really seemed to be a great juxtaposition from a discipline standpoint. And I thought it would be potentially open up a very rich and rewarding career path. So that's 20 years worth of history in 30 seconds. But it has been a very interesting journey, truly crisscrossing both coasts. So again, primary college education on the East Coast. Then I did get my graduate degree on the West Coast. Then I came back to the East Coast, all the time while working in advertising agencies. And really the big fork in the road happened in 2008. And that's when I joined LPL. I had the opportunity to meet Ken and really move from the advertising agency side of the world over to the client side. So that's just a little bit of history there to get us started.
Thank you. That's a really good backdrop. And as a quick reminder for folks also, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them into the chat, and I'll take a look at those, and we'll get those addressed as well, and we'll respond to those. So please feel free to ask questions. So just I guess a broad-based question to start things off, just given the backdrop of COVID right now. When you were on the agency side, or even earlier in your career on the client side, have you ever faced a situation, a dynamic as all-encompassing as this? And maybe it was all-encompassing for just one company versus being the entire globe. But any similarities to kind of crises that you've gone through in the past?
So I'll be absolutely honest, the magnitude of this particular crisis is far outweighs what we experienced with this financial crisis. And I think that while the impact is different and it's felt differently, I think in certain types of organizations and certain industries, the magnitude of a health-related, a true global pandemic hits individuals, whether they're our customers, whether they're patients of, in my case, the healthcare system. It hits people in a deeply visceral way that I think we didn't experience at quite the same level when we went through the original financial crisis. The other really significant difference here is that from 2008, even if you stretched it out to 2010, 2012, because the recovery means so many different things to different people, we all still worked in the same environment, right? So you didn't see that kind of upheaval to the move that we've had to virtual. So I think that, again, it's the magnitude, the personal impact of having the fear, quite honestly, of a global pandemic coupled with the inability to interact on the individual and in-person basis. I would say that there is truly nothing that I have ever seen that's even remotely like what we are going through now. I've had the same reaction from some of the provider executives, so a number of our medical directors and others who are both on the business side of the operational elements of the healthcare system and also those who provide care. To a T, I think unless you were perhaps an epidemiologist, we never thought that we would be in a truly global pandemic that spared nobody in terms of where you live, what state you're in, what industry you're in. So I think to sum it up, Ken, hard no, have we ever seen anything like this? And I'd of course love to get other people's perspective on this too, but there's really no element of the business that I'm now in on the healthcare side that hasn't had to undergo an extraordinary shift in a very, very compressed period of time.
I'm curious, this is a kind of a offshoot of the question that Joseph just asked, but are you finding it that have you had to adjust at all in terms of the way that you operate, the way that you communicate, the way that you kind of expectations that you have of your peers, given that you're now on the East Coast versus what you may have gotten accustomed to here on the West Coast, in terms of just kind of pace, all those dynamics there? Sure.
Great question. I'll tell you, I find it's fascinating to have worked and lived on both coasts. There is, I think, a bit of a perception bias that with those of us and for you who are on the phone on the West Coast, that because the weather is pleasant and it's often sunny and attitudes may or may not be more laid back. I actually found that to be quite the opposite experience when I was at both LPL Financial and Cetera. We had at both organizations it's just an extraordinarily fast-paced, hard-driving culture, and the expectations were, I think, very similar in terms of mindset, in terms of the way that we showed up, in terms of the way we ran our projects, in terms of what we were held accountable for. So I didn't really experience, it's fascinating, I didn't experience a cultural difference to the approach to work that's particularly different on both coasts. I think what is very, very different now really hinges on the onus being on us as marketing professionals to be extraordinarily, in some cases painfully precise about the expectations we have for our staff, for our respective teammates and those who report to us, but also what we are accountable for delivering as executives. Because it's just a very, very different way, fundamentally different way of communicating and interacting in the virtual environment. We don't, even though on video we can see body language, it's not the same as being in a room. We don't have the opportunity to, especially in the creative, those of us who work with designers, copywriters, and those who are heavy into ideation type of roles and responsibilities, we don't have the opportunity to do a 15-minute huddle in person, go grab a conference room with a whiteboard and sketch out ideas, at least not as immediately as we would have before. So I found that, yes, I have had to adjust my communication style and the frequency with which I communicate to all levels of my organization pretty significantly. And the expectation, it's interesting, the expectations in terms of work product and work delivery, I think now are even greater than they were pre-virtual world, because we don't have significant commutes. Even though many of us, myself included, are balancing, children at home, very, very different schedules. Expectations, I think, are all that much higher in terms of what we can produce, because we don't have some of those physical limitations that we might have had, before we all went virtual. So the hours are longer. Yeah, I mean, and you probably all experienced this too. You actually have to be very, very disciplined in getting up and walking away from your laptop or your desktop or your monitor, because you can be accessible in just, I hate to say 24/7, but sometimes it feels like that.
Right, exactly. So. Especially if you have customers across the world as well, no matter where you happen to be. That
absolutely right.
I had a conference call last night at 7 p.m. my time with someone in China, where it was 11 a.m. the next day their time. So you have to adjust, right? So it's a very interesting and poignant point you bring up. Even before COVID, there had been so much research out there about how people, companies that had a virtual structure and those that had kind of no vacation policy, they tended to see that their people, A, took less vacation, right? Even though it was unlimited. And B, those that were working from home tended to work more often. All the surveys, all the productivity things that you read out there showed that, time and time again. But I think a lot of organizations really didn't, or at least the leaders didn't quite believe it, right? And so now we've all been kind of forced into this, kind of grand social experiment, for lack of a better term. And companies are now realizing, oh, wow, my team actually is doing a pretty good job working remotely. They're either the same or even more productive. But I think it does vary depending upon the function. You talked about the creativity part of marketing, obviously. For me, my business has been virtual since day one, so for 13 years. But, we've had to really, be on the phone and texting on a regular basis. So that point around frequency is a good one. So how have you made that adjustment? How have you changed your management style, especially given the fact that you need to keep your team creative, if you will, and innovative also?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of the way that the executive team has oriented or reoriented itself and its own work processes and protocols, we have what we call it the Scrum. At 8 a.m. every day, the executive team meets. And sometimes the sessions are 15 minutes, sometimes they're an hour. We actually started that. Let's see, we went remote officially. It was Friday the 13th. It was March 13th. And we started our daily scrums on the following Monday, the 16th, and really haven't let up. And I will tell you, it has made an extraordinary difference. It was a necessity during the most, I'd call it crushing period during the pandemic, where we as a health plan actually needed to make a lot of decisions regarding coverage, regarding reimbursements, regarding the way that we were communicating with our members. There were certain policies and decisions that we actually had to either undo or redo in the face of the pandemic. So it started by necessity. We're keeping it by design, because we found that in just the importance of that communication and the ability, especially among an executive team or any leadership team, to, I like to call it, be able to work and talk in shortcuts, is incredibly, incredibly important. It's really helpful from a relationship building standpoint. That point is certainly obvious, but you have to be able to really develop a cadence and a rhythm to work together as an executive team. And especially for me, starting as a new executive, that became all the more apparent that I really needed. There was no formality, no true training program. It was truly, just dive right in. Come on in, the water's warm. It wasn't, but we had a remarkably effective opportunity in terms of building a teamwork and a camaraderie in a very short period of time. So I would absolutely encourage those types of checkpoints, and they're super easy. We did everything on Microsoft Teams, so we had the opportunity to see one another, quote unquote. And so that was really the first foray in terms of the way that the executive team changed its operating behavior. With regard to my team, so there are about 40 people who are under my purview, and it spans product. So that would actually be health insurance product design and innovation. And as somebody who, again, grew up in the financial services industry, there's perhaps strangely enough nothing boring about health insurance product design. It's actually fascinating, and the amount of work and creativity and blood, sweat, and tears that goes into designing an effective product is really, really fascinating. So product is under my purview, as is what I call the more traditional marketing, communications, public relations, corporate marketing, event management, and then strategy and competitive intelligence. So those particular disciplines, it's an interesting mix to span both product and strategy, and have them be part of my sleeve of the organization. And they had heretofore, prior to my arrival, been fairly siloed. So brand strategy worked over here, strategy worked over here. Strangely enough, they didn't really talk as much as they needed to, because, of course, corporate strategy, competitive intelligence should be infusing all of your brand strategy. So then we had also just, there's a lot of people who have been with the organization for a significant period of time. The organization itself had undergone a pretty radical transformation in the past 18 months, and they had rebranded. They were really starting to tap into and determine ways to integrate more holistically in the parent organization, because the firm of which I am the executive, which is AllWays Health Partners, is part of the Mass General Brigham enterprise. So all total, we have about 78,000 employees. The health insurance plan side has 500. So managing the communication style, not only among the 40 people on my team, let alone the 500 people that are part of AllWays, and then how we dock into how we really show up as part of that 78,000, it's still very much a work in progress. But I found, as I'm sure many of you have as well, so much of this relies on effective communication and the ability to be thoughtful within marketing. We're always expected to stay a couple steps ahead. So in order to really educate and bring my team along, and I talked about having to be just extraordinarily, in some cases, painfully clear about expectations, we now have all team meetings on a weekly basis in which everybody from the different disciplines, product strategy and Marcom, is expected to contribute. So we have planning sessions ahead of time. The agendas are sent out prior, as well as the presentations, and everybody on the team is expected to have read the materials and show up prepared and ask questions, and not really just be a passive observer. I've actually found that this particular shift, again, to the virtual environment there are some who have really embraced it and kind of gone whole hog and just appreciate what it can do for them. There are some who are a little bit quiet, and it's that balance and the ability to make sure that folks are not hiding, if you will, and just not participating, because the only way to make this, I love the expression, this grand social experiment, to really work, is if it's embraced by your whole team. And that's something that has been an interesting and a good challenge to make sure that folks really understand, what I expect of them, what the organization expects of them, what our patients expect of us, right? I mean, we're playing an extraordinarily important role in the delivery of care. And that's not to be self-congratulatory. It's to really shine a light on how important it is that we stay not only in lockstep with our customers, but one step ahead and really try and anticipate what their expectations are going to be.
Yeah, and actually, that's a great segue to my next question. And this is a little bit talking about what Lauren had touched on earlier also in her spotlight. But looking externally, right? I mean, there's two different things to juggle. There's the new expectation, the new communication style, the new dynamic internally with your team. And in your case, you have multi-discipline teams across a pretty wide variety of areas of expertise. When it comes to our customers, and Debbie actually asked this question about, if you're starting or just recently started your own business, how do customers expect us as providers, right? In your case, healthcare, but it could be any kind of provider. How have customers' expectations changed in your view of what we deliver to them, how we deliver that as a provider?
Fabulous question. I think that in my case, with regard to healthcare, the expectations that our customer service, so we have a customer service division, they are, and this is another area of opportunity we've really drilled down on. There are so many more phone calls, there are so many more emails that come into the customer service portion or part of the organization. Questions about care, questions about coverage, questions about COVID, questions about where they can get help. The expectation is rightfully very high in the part of the consumer that we are going to package and provide information that is accessible in a variety of ways. We continue to get a lot of phone calls. In some instances, especially with complicated, and healthcare, as we know, can be very complex. In some instances, it's actually easier for a patient or a member to pick up the phone because they want to talk to a human being. So we have very rigorous standards in terms of what our customer service team is held accountable for, and we call it's common parlance, but first call resolution. We have stood up a new team, a new cross-functional team within the organization that is solely dedicated to COVID-19 communications. And that spans a number of disciplines within clinical, within customer service, within product, within operations, and then within communications and marketing, and of course, legal and compliance. So this was an instance where what might have taken a number of phone calls, perhaps a handful of meetings, and a whole bunch of emails in order to get started, we stood it up in a matter of days. And that's actually been in place since March 16th. The first day that we went remote. Yeah, so that's an area, and now we're in a slightly different position now from where we were, 3 or 4 months ago. That organization, that sleeve, that cross-functional team can meet weekly, but it is very, very much an expectation that we over-deliver in terms of information. So we've taken a look at all channels then. So of course the phone, which is fairly straightforward. The member community. So we have an online member community by which we both solicit and get a lot of feedback about our products, about our services, about ideas that customers have. So we have 2 individuals within my team who oversee that community to make sure that we really do, keep our finger on the proverbial pulse of the customer. We are overhauling the member app that is in place right now. It's really still in beta, but at this point, that's table stakes that you have that type of opportunity to connect with your members. And we have a very robust sales force. So we, of course, within marketing, and the marketing side, work very, very closely with the sales team. And they're a great source of information from the brokers and from other benefits consulting organizations who are out in the community. So I would encourage all of us to cultivate as many touch points as we can in terms of getting feedback, but also have a disciplined and organized body. Again, cross-functional teams typically work the best to actually execute upon the feedback that we get, right? Because it's easy to get the feedback. Sometimes it's more challenging to actually formulate changes in policy or procedure to address what people are telling you.
And you mentioned a couple of them earlier on, but I didn't catch both of them as far as tools. So are there any new tools that you're now relying on that maybe you didn't before, or tools that you had before that you've realized, hey, actually this translates pretty well to the fully remote dynamic? Whether it's Slack or whether it's HubSpot or whatever it might be that might work for you. Yeah,
great, wonderful question. So we've actually started using HubSpot much more rigorously internally as well as externally. The communications platform before, and I would certainly be remiss if I didn't really focus in on the opportunity for overall corporate communication and how we've enhanced that. We, like many organizations, I think are often so focused on the consumer. In the case of AllWays, really in significant growth mode. We need to invest in what we call the talent brand of the organization, and part of that really is reliant and it's critical to make sure that your own employees are part of that storyline and that they have a voice. So we would send out corporate communications via Outlook, and they'd be well written. But again, we all know what Outlook is. It just, you can't track it. Emails get buried. So even simple things like making a shift to have the sleeve of corporate communications delivered via HubSpot, we got fantastic feedback. Number one, because the design platform is so much more engaging. It's trackable. So we were able to see, based on which executive was sending out the types of communication, what the engagement levels were. And I can tell you in our case, and again, we didn't have a baseline because prior, everything was just sent by Outlook, but we have up to 85% engagement level on the corporate initiative updates and messages from the Chief Executive Officer, which is unbelievable in terms of a baseline. So again, I'd encourage it's simple, very straightforward set of tools that we have at our disposal, and in some cases are probably already using. We had been using HubSpot primarily for outbound marketing, And, it was just sort of this very silly kind of, light bulb moment. Why don't we use these tools internally?
Sure.
So hopefully we'll see more and more of that. I did mention the talent brand. We're actually dedicating both time and money and people to building out our talent brand, which might seem somewhat counterintuitive during a period of crisis like this. But I actually think there's never been a better time to really take a look with your primary constituents, and especially with human resources, at what the talent brand is for the organization. What do people internally and externally really think? It's moments of this true introspection that I think are going to help us lead the way out, because at some point there will be a way out. We don't know when, we don't know exactly what that looks like. But what Ken and I were chatting about the other day is I fully believe, and likely many of you on the call today do as well, that marketing will lead the way out. I mean, it's incumbent upon us as the owners of the experience and the leaders from a communication standpoint to be as clear as we possibly can be about every step. Right? It's the expression, you make the path as you walk it. I try to keep away from kind of heart-tugging cliches like that, but it really is true in our case.
So I'm curious about, when we look at the marketing piece, the customer piece, what about the financial piece, right? So, I mean, myself, even with a small 7-person firm, the projections for the year, the expectations, the budgets, the allocation of resources for marketing, for advertising, everything has just been turned on its head, right? Nothing is what it was 4 months ago. So in an organization of 500 people under the umbrella of a 70,000 plus organization, how have you tackled that? What have you guys, did you just kind of scrap everything and say, all right, we're starting fresh, for Q2 and Q3 and Q4, or how are you managing that part of the crisis?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And we have had to make significant adjustments to the media mix that we use on the advertising side of the marketing budget. And it's very interesting. I made the comment, this crisis has forced us as leaders, I think, to be extraordinarily introspective about not only the way that we communicate, the way that our teams are either run and or are organized, but the way that we deploy our capital. And historically, because we're a much smaller player in the organization, in the industry, in Massachusetts and New England, we're very much a challenger brand. The organizations against whom we compete are exponentially larger than we are. And they have exponentially more dollars to spend. So I think the historic perspective had been, even though we're a challenger brand, we need to kind of beat people at their own game, right? We need to still advertise in the same channels. We just have to have different creative. We need to have a different message, but we still need to keep focused on the same channels to deliver that message. And honestly, what we were forced, and I'm very glad of it, to do is take a very deep look at where these dollars are actually being spent and really think through, in this particular model, and it's kind of fun and for me wonderful, the similarities in the healthcare model with healthcare insurance and the independent broker-dealer industry, where I grew up and spent the vast majority so far of my career. They're very similar. It's an intermediated channel. It's truly a business-to-business to consumer intermediated sale. And for that reason, at least in Massachusetts, the brokers and benefit consulting houses are extraordinarily important parts of our value chain. We don't sell directly to consumers. We sell to brokers and HR benefits managers who then make our platform and our products available to their employees, the end consumer. So for AllWays, it's absolutely imperative that we have that customer awareness because it'll be that much more difficult for somebody to sell an offering that nobody on the other end has heard of. But the way to necessarily get in front of the consumer for an awareness play versus a true account-based marketing, ABM strategy that's focused on brokers and benefits consulting, that's a very, very different way of operating. So that is where we have made some significant adjustments to how we deploy our strategy and also how we deploy our spend. I'm not even remotely interested in trying to outspend my competition. I'm interested as a challenger brand for opening up new product development opportunities and for leveraging the fact that we are part of one of the best health systems in the country, right? So this is, again, the importance of communication, but the importance of, take the opportunity to get creative and have, I hate to say have fun, but truly try and have a little bit of fun with how you can deploy some limited dollars. Everybody I have found across the board, regardless of industry, is working with many, many, many fewer dollars. Advertising sponsorships are looking very different. We did a lot of events, right? In-person events. Boston is, you're probably quite familiar, and I am re-educating myself about this extraordinarily robust sports town. So the sponsorships associated with professional teams and the opportunities there, we have to revisit all of those. So this shift has been truly, truly profound. But honestly, I think it makes us, and it's hard. I'm not going to gloss over the fact that it's extraordinarily difficult. And in many cases, it's a difficult message to convey because there is an element of education, right? You have to educate your constituents as to why you're approaching things differently and also allocating spend differently. But the discipline that gives you to really, really then focus on ROI and not making decisions that can't be backed up by data. In my case, it's been very freeing because now I have a group of my ad agency partners as well as my internal constituents who really understand, right? They get why we've had to make such profound changes. So hopefully that helps illustrate a little. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah, and it's certainly it's not a cut and dry issue, or you don't just apply Formula A to it and just assume it's going to work. Part of this whole adjustment for a lot of people is that everything is just so fluid, and things that were set in stone that were expected to happen a certain way 6 months ago, now it's all turned on its head. So and to that point, actually, I'm going to combine two questions, one from Joseph, one from Vicky. Are there any? It's really easy to feel very or be concerned about not sounding empathetic enough, right? And using too many buzzwords. We have this discussion internally about, do we use the word COVID in our subject lines? Do we not, right? Do we use certain buzzwords that you hear, ad nauseum, like unprecedented? Everything is unprecedented, right? So, so the question, the combined question is, are there any organizations that you've seen that you maybe not are looking to emulate, but you've really been impressed by, or that are really kind of leading that charge in a way, on the marketing branding side, to not be cliche and not be, tone deaf, but be empathetic enough to really engage their customer base?
Yeah, fabulous, fabulous question. I would encourage us all to look out of category for examples of firms that are doing this very, very well. I agree that there has been an overuse of, truly, if I see the word unprecedented and in these unprecedented times, I mean, that phrase is everywhere. And we're not that we're done with it, but that's where you really do start to sound like everybody else. So it's to be very careful, especially within the healthcare industry, of not seeming like an also-ran or a follower. I actually have seen and gotten, even for our own events team, some wonderful ideas from LLS, which is the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They do a tremendous amount of fundraising. They obviously previously would rely a lot on their in-person events. Their event management engine had to undergo some very, very significant changes. They've come out with some really fabulous programs. I think that they have done an extraordinary job of really pivoting and staying true to their mission. and being able to still really engage both corporate leadership at a macro level, while still remaining true to their brand promise. So they've definitely stood out as a great company that I paid attention to, and again, got some really awesome ideas. They've been very, very forthcoming as well. I had the opportunity to participate in a panel probably about a month ago, mostly in observation mode. But what I've actually found is that many companies, organizations are just being incredibly transparent in a good way, sharing ideas, what's worked for them as they've made shifts in terms of their both operations and especially from a marketing standpoint, really being open to sharing ideas and brainstorming. I actually, as a consumer, and full disclosure, I am in no way, shape, or form related to John Foley, who is the CEO of Peloton. So this is not an endorsement for the product, but as a consumer, I am actually very impressed with the outreach that I receive by Peloton as a consumer and owner of one of their products, but also the way that they have shifted, and not just from going from the physical shift, right, from having classes that were usually 50 or so people in a studio to having one instructor in the studio to then instructors working from their home. It wasn't just the physical shift of how the exercise regime or protocol was being delivered to the consumer. It was really a shift in their entire marketing and communication strategy. So if any of you are also either consumers or members, they have definitely stood out, again, and totally out of category from healthcare. But honestly, that's where I tend to look for inspiration. I am bombarded in a good way every single day from the competitive intelligence from those who are in my space within healthcare. But I often find that a lot of the inspiration comes from far afield from what I get on an everyday basis. So.
That's great. That's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the word fun a little while ago, a couple of times, right? and so shifting gears a little bit, everything is so kind of intense right now. We all watch on Zoom nonstop. My wife and I were talking last night about the fact that we feel like we're just kind of in this mode all the time, right? Just looking at a screen.
Yep.
How are you able to infuse any fun, any whether it's corporate social responsibility activities, somebody asked about that, or whether it's wellness programs in a virtual manner, but how have you been able to keep the team light and not so intense and so overly focused that they really kind of lose that creativity because they're just so stressed about everything?
Yeah, no, that is a fabulous question. And this industry in particular, very, very easy to get burned out, certainly on the magnitude of responsibility and on the provider side, the care delivery side is just absolutely immense. So what we have done specifically within the marketing team, there's a couple things, and very easy, very straightforward. But in addition to the weekly meetings that we have and that everyone participates in, which are primarily business updates, we have a marketing newsletter. We just call it the weekly roundup, and it's a short encapsulation of what was covered in the prior weekly all-team meeting. And we have a little section of this newsletter called the break room, which is an opportunity for cartoons or memes or funny quotes. And it's literally just a moment of levity that gets delivered by HubSpot, to everybody's inbox. So they know that we're thinking about them, and it's just an opportunity even to again just get out of that the Zoom culture, right, where we're all just sort of heads down staring at our computers and plowing through work. Another thing that we've done is we have a virtual pizza lunch that we do every week, and folks are encouraged, and it's completely voluntary. And it takes place right before the all-team meeting. And we have a series of voluntary exercises where it's basically a mix and match. In one instance, we had People anonymously submit childhood photos, and then during the virtual pizza lunch, we would try and match up, you know, who the childhood photo was with who the adult photo was. We actually did a couple variations on that. We did fun prom pictures, and let's see what else. Oh, can you match the movie, favorite movie, to the team member? So, I mean, the iterations are endless that you could do with something like that. And we've had great attendance, which is fun. So it just shows you that people are really, really hungry for that moment of connectivity. We are going to expand the virtual pizza lunch to do an actual pizza delivery as well. So it's a little bit more complicated in making that happen from a logistic. We'll probably use something like Uber Eats. And have one of our admins actually just organize everything, and then make sure that the deliveries get to people. But it's really that hunger for whatever, again, they're safe, of course, and, you know, following protocol. But if there is an opportunity to have some physical delivery of joy, who doesn't like pizza, you know, it absolutely, you know, recommend something like that. I mean, people are thrilled to participate. So it just shows that importance of community, and even those small, inexpensive outreaches, so folks know we're thinking about them. And, you know, we acknowledge that the workload is extraordinary, and the resources that we have are not terribly robust, and they will likely not be for quite some time. I will say that I think because of the magnitude, though, of the crisis and how it has shifted so much of our world to be virtual, there's a level of interest and excitement in terms of leapfrogging what had been perhaps a bit of a slog in some instances. You know, healthcare is not necessarily the most, you know, not necessarily an early adopter of various technologies. We've seen truly more innovation and adoption in a digital realm, whether that's the use of, you know, Teams, the use of virtual technology to facilitate meetings, virtual care that's delivered by our providers. We've done more in 2 months than the enterprise probably would have done under a normal 2-year time frame. And I think that's probably true for a lot of different types of organizations. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of percentage, you know, points higher adoption. And it's ushered in a new way of thinking in terms of where opportunities could be. And, you know, what I'm trying to do within my own organization is harness that interest and really hone in on those who, you know, truly have raised their hands, and because they can sort of triangulate outside of their own experience, sort of as part of the larger enterprise. How could we do this differently, right? How could we use technology to make a process more efficient? So I've actually found that despite the admittedly longer work hours, there's very, very interesting conversations happening now that probably wouldn't have if we hadn't been faced with this kind of crisis/opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. And I think it's forcing everybody's kind of, I don't say complacency, but kind of this kind of been there, done that mindset that we all had as recently as 6 months ago to be shifted completely. And like you said, looking outside of your own category is a great example of that. You know, so often companies are comparing themselves to, you know, the leader in their sector, as opposed to saying, well, what are other sectors doing? But I think right now people are taking lessons from all over the place, all industries, all company sizes, all over the globe, to figure out how to apply those pieces to their own organization also. So, so looking forward, you touched on this a little bit a few moments ago, but looking forward, how do you see the role of marketing changing? And I hate using the term post-COVID because I don't know if we're ever going to be post-COVID, but let's say post-trough, you know, post-COVID trough. Yeah. How do you see the marketing role changing, you know, going forward?
Yep. Yeah, no, a fabulous question. I think that it will only get more challenging, quite frankly, and more important. And I say that for a few reasons. We've all likely made a number of decisions in terms of either policy or procedure questions, changes, or even our own team dynamics, how we manage workload, how we manage our reporting structure, how we manage our firms, how we manage our business. We have to think about what happens if we try and put the toothpaste back into the tube. So there's a number of implications there. And again, some might seem a little bit straightforward in terms of, oh, okay, well, sort of post-COVID or post-state of emergency or post some sort of structural rubric, we could make this type of change, right? Or we could go back to doing this particular type of thing the way we did pre-COVID. My concern as a marketer and a strategist is that it only gets that much more challenging to undo any of our changes the longer we operate in this kind of environment. So, and again, that probably seems straightforward, but there's a number of downstream implications that we should all, as marketers and thought leaders, be cognizant of or start to be very, very aware of in terms of, okay, what are my team's expectations now moving forward? Because a policy change is one thing, but a behavioral change is something completely different when it comes to managing. So I think we need to be very, very vigilant, certainly from an operations standpoint and the way we work with operations colleagues. But our partnership with human resources has never been more important, I think, than it is now. I mentioned before the talent brand. I would definitely invest in that. And it doesn't even need to be the dollar investment. It's just the time and the thought about what you want your brand to be. Whatever post-COVID or post-trough is, will probably never be what it was before. And I don't think that we should be thinking of, okay, whatever return to normalcy is, I have a feeling it's probably not ever going to be the same. And that's where, if you go back to one of your very, very early questions, Ken, the difference between this situation and what happened in the financial crisis is that much more profound because of so many behaviors that have had to shift in very, very meaningful ways. For those of you who might be a part of large organizations where there is a real estate or facilities department, I would spend time cultivating those relationships as well, because if there is a return to work protocol that gets established, is likely very different, and that will result in perhaps different configurations or different numbers of individuals who can be in a building at the same time, different use of communal space, right? Kitchens, conference rooms. So again, understanding what is the downstream impact. There's the decision, right? But then there's a downstream impact, and what does that actually mean to your team? And trying to really understand and influence where you can and where is appropriate, I think is certainly a challenge. Certainly, with regard to sales, the forecasting, the actual metrics that are used, any reforecasting that might have happened, likely we've all reforecasted in some way, shape, or form, but that transparency and those relationships with the sales side of the organization, I think become all the more just incredibly, incredibly important to make sure that those are managed. So and this is one of the most challenging, and also, again, I'll use the F word fun parts of marketing. All roads really do lead to marketing. I mean, if you think about it, there's probably no aspect of an organization that you don't touch or influence in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's either covert or behind the scenes or very, very overt. So that's what makes this, again, really, really challenging, especially in an environment like this. But if you flip it into the opportunity side, we have an opportunity as leaders to just orchestrate a fascinating way of doing business moving forward, I think.
No, I agree. And I think, to your point about, what's happening right now is going to become everybody's just general expectation. I think just yesterday, Google announced they're going to allow their employees to stay remote, working from home all the way through next summer, right? So at that point, that is the new normal. There isn't any previous normal to go back to. So I think the whole working remotely, on the recruiting side, as far as what we're seeing in our world, that is going to be one of the most profound changes that we're going to see going forward. This is going to be seen as a pivot point, definitely. because for so long, candidates were asking to work from home and wanted that ability. But a lot of companies, as I said before, were really resistant to allowing that. But now that companies realize it is manageable, it's going to shift the workforce. It's going to shift, where they hire from. If you can hire, a really strong developer from Nebraska and save 30% versus hiring a developer from San Francisco, why would you not do that if they're going to be remote anyway, right? So those are some of the real fundamental changes that we're seeing on the recruiting side. The last piece I want to touch on is also with regard to change, and that's in terms of leadership style, right? There's so many books out there about leaders and what the common threads are among good leaders. Also, do you see a change in what will constitute a good leader going forward in this new reality versus what may have been expected of you as a leader, 6 months ago?
Yes, 100% yes. And here's where the expectations, I think, of a marketer now, and this certainly I'll share from my own expectations, even still being new to the organization. The expectations are very, very high that marketing is not advertising or communications or very siloed. Marketing is much, much broader, I think, than it may have traditionally been considered in a pre-COVID environment. And I think that is something I've actually seen and heard from other colleagues of mine in other organizations and industries, that there's an increased reliance upon marketing executives to very much have a voice at the table when it comes to corporate strategy, when it comes to product development, when it comes to sales leadership, when it comes to, again, some of those downstream implications of policy or operational decisions. So I think, and not to scare any of us away, but I actually think the leadership expectations are significantly higher. I've seen a really, really, an opening up of the C-suite where the marketing, I think that the marketing of 20 years ago, which was very, very highly focused on brand strategy, brand awareness, sort of top line, impressions, favorability, and where ROI or some of the more quantitative aspects of our discipline were perhaps a little bit harder to manage. The difference in 5, let alone the last 10 years, from a technology and innovation standpoint, I think has forced us to really up our level of participation. And with that comes the expectation, that we are as well versed in reading a balance sheet and contributing to financial discussions and mergers and acquisition opportunities. I think that there's the seat now for marketing is at every table, as opposed to being perhaps a little bit more limited before. So buckle up, boys and girls. We're going to be busy.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be interesting. I use the word fun. I'm sure some components of it will certainly be fun. At least it'll be different. And if we can embrace it in a way where I think it's going to allow everybody to kind of see the new creativity that can come out of it, I think it will actually be fun also.
Absolutely.
Okay, so any last kind of parting thoughts that you might have for folks? And a lot of the folks that are here today are small business owners like myself, part of small to mid-sized organizations too. Anything that you might talk about in terms of tactically speaking? So someone asked a question earlier about direct mail, for example. Are there things that we should be looking at as small to mid-sized businesses that maybe we didn't consider before as some parting thoughts?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Ken. I truly think that there is very much still a role for the tactical, delivery of information. We still use direct mail for a number of our marketing campaigns and various constituents to both providers and consumers. It may be a personal bias of mine, but I found when done well and trackable, it is absolutely a core component of the marketing mix. And you may even have a better opportunity or stronger opportunity now, because so much has shifted to digital, to have an opportunity to surprise and delight and interact with a consumer or a potential consumer in a different way. And hand to God, the other day, I opened up my front door and there was and I don't know when the last time is, years ago, there was a door tag for a new, and it wasn't even a new, but it was a cleaning service that I hadn't ever heard of. And honestly, and this is just, again, a very personal example, because we moved very recently into our home and happened to need a cleaning service. But this door tag completely cut through the clutter. It wasn't, you know, it was well designed. It was very timely. And that's what it is, right? I mean, so much of this, what we do as marketers and business owners, is about being at the right place at the right time. And I'll tell you, this particular cleaning service happened to be at the right place at the right time. And had it just been another digital ad, or had it been even, you know, a postcard, maybe, but I would absolutely not remove direct mail, really, from the marketing mix. I still think it's extraordinarily effective. I will say that in terms of local influencers and organizations just like this, you know, there's some really good, and to be careful too, because there's a lot of noise and nonsense, but I've seen some very effective, you know, LinkedIn groups in particular, you know, some local Facebook groups, again, sort of category specific or industry specific, where you do have a really, really good open exchange of information. And now with the way that, especially with business to business marketing, the ability to do much more targeted, much more cost effective advertising, especially if you are either launching a product or, you know, doing a product expansion. We've had some great examples and results of targeting business owners on LinkedIn with digital ads that I would absolutely recommend looking into. It's very straightforward, and the costs have only come down in the last few years with the digital advertising mix, which is fantastic.
That's great. That's good. Yeah. And again, I think it's a matter of, like you said, kind of staying on top of what the trends are, but doing things like those door hangers is a great idea. I mean, had you gotten an email right in your inbox for a cleaning service, you know, A, it would have gone into spam probably, and B, if you did see it, you would have deleted it in half a second. But those
exactly right.
The old is now new is a good, you know, kind of mindset to have, for sure. Definitely. Good.
Yeah.
Good, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I mean, you shared a lot of great insights. We were all kind of taking notes and writing to each other in the chat as you were talking as well. So some of the key takeaways. So thanks for sharing that. If someone has a more direct, specific question, can they reach out to you through LinkedIn? Is that okay? I'm sure you'll have.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
I would love that.
All right. Especially with knowing both the East Coast and West Coast cultures now, also, we might reach out to you for that kind of insight also.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I love it.
Thanks so much, everybody. It was great seeing you. We're actually having another meeting next week. So next week on the 5th will be our August event. And we'll have another speaker from Austin, Jessica Taylor. So look forward to seeing you there. Again, be sure to let us know if you are interested in doing a success trio. You'll get a follow-up email from Elaine shortly, and we'd love to have you involved in that. And next month, we are going to start our virtual networking session prior to the regular presentation. So you'll see some emails about that too, to Marissa's point, to kind of find ways to kind of share information and market intelligence and best practices. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the end of July, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, Marissa.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.